Hey, this is Rich over at TVP Live with another quick tips tutorials brought to you by Photoshop Elements Custom Tutorials Group. And let's jump right in with today's poster. Wanted to know how to help the lighting on these two beautiful birds. But basically the issue is, if you look at the whole photograph, is that the lights and the darks are pretty much the same throughout the whole photograph, except for this portion of the hawk here. The lights and the darks are similar in the background and as they are on the birds, so the birds don't stand out. So you want to make them either darker or lighter, or make the background darker or lighter so that the birds will really stand out. There's a couple ways you can do that. If you try to enhance lighting and brightness, and if you try to work on the picture, what happens is that the whole picture becomes lighter or darker. And the effect is that whatever you're trying to fix also does the same thing to the background. And that doesn't really separate the birds. So what you really want to do is separate the birds. Now normally I would say using the polygon tool to carefully cut out the birds. But because this is a long lens photograph, when you zoom in, look what you see. The edges are really not that sharp. They're pretty fuzzy. And that's just simply product of a long lens on a camera. So in this case, we want to do is duplicate and cut out the birds, and then use the background version to brighten and darken the birds. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to take that top layer, the only layer we have of the birds. I'll right click and duplicate it. And now we have a duplicate layer. Let's turn off the duplicate layer. And on that top layer, let's cut out the birds, not using the polygon, but an eraser tool, and not just a regular eraser tool. Come down here and grab the brush, and instead of the top brushes up here that are sharp, we're going to come down a little bit to the soft brushes. So all these brushes down here are soft. Let's start with a small brush, like a 5-point, and get the small details. And I'm going to do shift click. So I'll click, hold the shift down, and click. Click, shift, click. Click, shift, click. And then I could just draw out along the edges. Now when I get to edges that are not so small, I can make the brush bigger. So let's make that like a 15-point brush. And then just basically brush out the bird. Now once I've traced out the edge of the bird with a soft brush, then I can take the polygon tool and then just draw within that trace to get rid of the whole innards of the bird. I'll start here. And I don't have to do the whole thing at once. I could do portions at a time. I'll double click to make the marching ants, and then I'll hit delete. And there's that portion. I can zoom in and start the next portion. I'll zoom out and hit delete. And there goes the center portion. Once I have the first bird deleted, I'll do the same with the second one. And now when it comes out to this head section, I'm going to make another layer and keep this head section separately. So I'll just right click and duplicate that layer and turn the other two layers off. On the top layer, I just want to keep the head section and delete everything else around it. I'm going to select inverse and hit delete, and that deletes everything but just that head. I want to keep that head and neck on its own layer right here. I'll turn that off, go back to the middle layer, and continue erasing as I was before. And once I have the second bird erased on the edges, I'm going to grab the polygon and start erasing by grabbing each portion of the bird and using the polygon tool clicking with the left mouse button and hitting delete, and just continue doing that until the whole bird is gone. And once we get done with tracing the bird with the polygon tool, and we'll hit delete, and there we go. We got both birds are completely out of the photo. So now that I've got the birds on their own bottom layer here, I'm going to split the birds up into two so I can change the colors on each one separately. So I'll go ahead and turn everything off and choose the background layer and separate that layer into two layers. How? I'm going to just simply take the polygon tool, and it doesn't matter where you cut it as long as you cut out each bird individually right at the points where they touch right here like this. So one doesn't affect the other. I'll come down here, over to here, and then double click at the end. I'm going to right click and hit cut. Watch up here, it's going to create its own layer. Boom. So now we got our left side and our right side. Let's turn on the foreground, which is the background. And now we can have each one separately lit simply by choosing it, either one that we want. So I'm going to take this left one, and I'm going to go up here and watch the magic. Go to lighting, brightness, and watch the left bird. I can make the bird brighter or darker. I can make the contrast darker or less. So basically what I want to do, because the contrast is so high on this, let's bring the contrast a little less and bring the brightness up a little bit. And look at that. The bird just pops. Here's before and after. Before, after. Now I'm purposely exaggerating for this tutorial, but I'm going to bring this way up here like that so the bird stands out. Now I'm going to take the other bird, which is this background layer here, and now we can play around. Remember, we made the head separately, so don't worry about the head. We're just worried about the wings. And as we adjust the wings, the head's not going to change because we already have a separate layer up here of the head. So we go down here, lighting, brightness, contrast. Watch again. More contrast, less contrast. See that? The detail comes out with less contrast. Same with brightness. I can bring the brightness down or up. So what I'm going to do once again is, because it's too high contrast, let's bring the contrast down. That'll bring out a little more here. Now where it's black here, there's not much you can do about that. It's always going to be black. There's no information there that you can come back with. So all we can do is just bring everything else up just a tad right around there. And that looks good. Here's the before, after. Before, after. And then finally, what we want to do is maybe take the whole background, and that's going to be this background layer right here. And we can play around with that color and go to enhance once again, lighting, brightness, and we can make the contrast more contrasty or less contrasty, whatever your heart's desire. Same with the brightness. Bring it up like that. Look at that. It's completely up to you. Or make it dark and make the birds stand out as if they were lit. Look at that. That's pretty cool. Now, if you really want, you could do the same thing with each layer with the amount of colors. In case you wanted to bring out this bird's color, let's say, I can go to Enhance, Color, Adjust Hue and Saturation, and watch this one bird here. I can take the color out completely, or I can make it really bright, like overly saturated. And in this case, I'm just going to bring a little bit out right around there. And then once again, you have like a final lightness control here. Well, there you go. That's just one way to be able to change the hues and the contrasts and the lighting of the foreground versus the background. This is it for this tutorial. This is Rich calling it quits, saying over and out.